Welcome to EWTN's Bookmark. I'm Doug Keck, your host. Our guest author is Chris Padgett, author of Holy Mary, Mother of God, and also Spirituality You Can Live With, Stronger Faith in 30 Days. And they're both published by Servant Books. Welcome, Chris, to EWTN's Bookmark.
I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, you know what? When I see you, I think of the Yellow Brick Road. I think of the Tin Man and the Scarecrow.
I know, it's been a long time.
This sounds absurd and oblique, but what does it all mean?
Well, in the old days, the band Scarecrow and Tin Man was kind of a play on Hebrews 8:10, which the Scarecrow, right, got a new heart, and the Tin Man got a new heart, Scarecrow got a new brain, and as Christians we're given a new heart and a new mind in Christ. So that's why we called ourselves Scarecrow and Tin Man. And that was a long time ago. I'm a little bit chubbier now, and
not quite as much of a scarecrow.
Not as much of a scarecrow. I'm starting to resemble one of the, people at Oz.
Oh,
so.
Understood. Okay. Well, let me ask you, what are you doing now? I know people recently would have seen you on Life on the Rock with our dynamic duo, Doug Barry and Father Mark.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about what you're doing now. You're teaching, right? Is that right?
Teaching a couple classes at Franciscan University, which I love. It's a great place. My daughter's going there. I've done the youth conferences there forever. I did my master's degree there. I'm a big fan of it, and so they allowed me to come in and do some teaching in the theology department. I teach a class on Christian marriage. Sometimes I teach a class on foundations of Catholicism, and this semester one on Christian moral principles.
Well, let me ask you, coming out of the music and going through that period, how did you end up in this area of expertise or interest?
Well, I've always had a real passion for learning, even when I was a young boy. I spent a lot of time reading and studying about my faith, and I had majored even in biblical studies for a while. Long and the short of it was when I became Catholic, I converted into Catholic faith, Easter of '99. I did an enormous amount of reading and studying and preparing and listening and talking with religious and family members because this was a big jump for me. And from that moment on, really, I feel a lot of things have just been falling into place. I'm just hungry for that information still, because every time I read something about Our Lady or about the faith, I find, that's invigorating.
Well, let me ask you, since obviously you were in the band in the 90s, in '99 you converted. So I would have thought, was it more like a Christian band as opposed to a Catholic band? Did it also impact your ability to get gigs and things when you converted?
It did, absolutely. In fact, we were already in the system when we became Catholic. It was me and the other guy, the other main guy for the band. And so we became Catholic, and it was kind of like, well, they're already there, and we kind of became a bit of the token Catholics within the industry. Now, a lot's changed in the last 10 years. I mean, amazing changes and a lot more ecumenical. But back then, I'm sure that there was a lot of venues that did not have us back, a lot of questioning about us becoming intentionally Catholic. Right. In fact, our producers looked at me and said...
What do you mean becoming intentionally Catholic?
Well, what I mean by, who would intentionally join the Catholic Church?
You might have been born there and haven't figured out how to get out yet.
Yeah, well, that's what my producers said. They looked at me one day with a pile of books and they're like, you're not actually considering becoming Catholic, are you? Like, we had to leave the Catholic Church to find Jesus. So it just was a very interesting time. But I've been a person who loves to read and loves to explore the faith, and it's been
how many books have you written now?
3 with Servant. I have one in the works with another publishing house.
Okay, and we're talking about 2 different ones here. And this one certainly would separate you from most Protestants, a book about Mary, Holy Mary, Mother of God. Why did you decide to write a book about Our Lady? Was she important in your conversion process? Has she been important in your life since?
I would say that Mary was the most difficult thing in terms of my conversion process. That's not an uncommon thing to hear, right? But the reason I wanted to write about Mary is because she changed my life. There's no doubt about it. I fell in love with Our Lady, and that surprised me a little bit. I knew as much as I could know about Our Lady during the time of entering in the church and having a sense of peace about it, Easter of '99. But it was almost like the Lord said to me, Chris, if you want to go deeper in your walk with me, I want you to know my mother. Now, that seems to be a paradox for most in the Protestant milieu. How could you get to know Christ more by knowing his mother? But that was the beautiful truth, was that the more I knew about Our Lady, the more she told me about her son.
Right. Now, in the beginning, there's a little page that says, Early Praise for Chris Padgett's Holy Mary, Mother of God book. So this is somebody who liked your book, Brad Farmer. But he said, Chris Padgett brings a welcome invasion of the reality of Mary into the intimacy of your own home. Invasion, intimacy. What do you think he was trying to get to? What was the point he was making about this book?
Well, I think he really liked it. He's a good guy, and he has a lot of kids. And I talk a little bit about
As
Our
you do
Lady
too, right?
in the family. Yeah,
right.
we have 9 children so far, and I think he just felt like sometimes we just need a little bit of a wake-up call in the family dynamic of the importance and the role of Our Lady. And that might seem a little, at times, invasive, but it can be truly life-giving and life-changing.
Now, you also have a good friend of ours, Father Donald Calloway, has been on many times, and people know him, but Divine Mercy. He says, I highly recommend this book for those who desire to know and love Our Lady in a more personal way. Now, that's an interesting thing, a more personal way. We hear about our personal relationship with Jesus a lot.
Right.
But we don't really hear about our personal relationship with Our Lady.
Yeah.
Is it similar, different?
Well, I don't think that it's at odds with each other. It's certainly not. So the one will help us in the other. You know, it's interesting because Father Don Calloway blessed an early manuscript of this book. I had kind of run it down to him, and I said, please bless this. And what I wanted to do was, this book was not meant to be a book on apologetics because I converted, so therefore I would write a book about Our Lady in an apologetical form. But no, I wanted to show why Our Lady was very important, still radically important in our life, for us to have a growing spirituality. And that's what that is.
Now, in the beginning, you have, to all the lovely women in my life, Hannah, Sarah, Madeline, and Mary Padgett, especially my wife, Linda. And I thought that was very nice, and you have a large family. Then you say, I also know that my boys, Noah, Colby, Jude, and Joseph, need to foster their devotion to Mary too. Is it easier for women to have a relationship with Our Lady than it is for men?
I don't know that we could say that. I think it depends. Some of it depends on our parental influence. Like we're really formed and shaped by the impact of our mothers and our fathers. So we'll have a sensitivity towards, you know, Our Lady, I think, if our mother has been very maternal and very Marian. But I think if we have a difficult family dynamic where mom can be very closed off and, you know, difficult, manipulative, you fill in the blank with a flaw, that can hinder our approach. I mean, that happens all the time for people in their walk with God as father. If you've had a father that's left your family, been abusive, or, you know, fill in the blank again with a flaw, then it does impact how you look at God. You don't see him as approachable, as understanding, as sympathetic to your situation.
Right, and is that why you say, would that all of you could have met my grandmothers?
Yes, amen. Yeah, because I think in a lot of ways my grandmothers were majorly influential in my life. One showed me the beauty of joy and celebration. The other showed me the beauty of a relationship with Christ. And I think I became the man I am today because of them, and specifically because of my mother and her faithfulness to Christ in difficult times.
Right, you say we must resist the temptation to shuffle Mary into a corner, thinking her to be so meek and mild as to be paralyzed by the horrors of our modern age.
Right. Mary is, I mean, she's crushing the head of the serpent. You know, she's a warrior. And so I don't know that it does us too much good to make her some sort of an ethereal or, you know, being that's just floating about, you know, just in, you know, beatific bliss. I mean, she certainly is in beatific bliss, but she's hard at work for our salvation, really, praying on behalf of.
You say, I encourage you to approach this topic with a fresh perspective, especially, I'm assuming, for people maybe who haven't thought about Our Lady that much, right? Perhaps you have received misinformation about Mary that has limited or skewed your understanding of her. Perhaps you've encountered people devoted to Mary who seem, to put it bluntly, odd. If you can revisit this topic with an open heart, I'm confident you'll be surprised as the role of Mary has played in the church, et cetera, et cetera. Has that been your experience, or is that the experience of people you've run into?
Absolutely, all of the above. I mean, in some ways, some of it is just basic misunderstanding about Marian devotion. I mean, that happens all the time, and there's a lot of stereotypes. But there are some people that really seem to reinforce stereotypes to the extreme. And simply put, there was, in our area, there was this oil stain on a window, and I was not Catholic at the time, but I think I called it Oil Slick Mary. It just was ridiculous, and everybody was showing up there in the droves with their candles, and I thought, well, God could use this. He used Balaam's donkey, right? I mean, he can use anything to bring people to a relationship with Christ. But does Marian devotion mean that I have to go venerate every single, cinnamon bun that looks like Our Lady? That cannot possibly be the case. Right. And I just felt like there were these extremes, and I feel like a lot of people focus on that and say that's what Marian devotion is like, and that's not what I'm talking about.
Well, you even have a chapter talking about apparitions, and obviously those we hear about, and obviously the ones the church has said, acknowledges. But even those you don't really have to give assent to.
Right. You know what? The truth is, if a person would follow the church's teaching, jump into the sacraments, I tell you, they could be an amazing saint, right? Thanks be to God. And all those Marian devotions that are approved and beautiful are because they point us and bring us back to Christ and the sacraments.
Right. You say Marian devotion is not just another task that needs to be checked off on today's to-do list. Rather, it is an opportunity to realize you have a mother who is waiting for you to get to know her son more and longs to assist you in doing so. Had that been the way you had first dealt with her approach to her, kind of just checking her off?
I knew that the church had 4 dogmas about Our Lady that I could not, be fickle about. I had to make a decision about whether I was going to fall in step with the church's teaching or not. When I came to that conclusion, I felt like, okay, well, I'm okay, now I can become Catholic with a sense of peace of mind. But I realized that it was more than just, just accepting she's immaculately conceived and assumed into heaven. There's more to Mary than just those objective truths.
I see. Okay, just that kind of intellectual assent.
Yeah.
You say in a section here, what do you want? You say Mary's whole life was soaked in love. What do you mean it was soaked in love?
Just think of a sponge that's just filled to the brim with water, and you pick it out of that bucket and it's just dripping. I feel like that's Our Lady in terms of being open to the will of God, being open to the love and the mission of her Son. And I think if we could love God like Our Lady, let's just say we could love Jesus like Mary. That's my encouragement to many of my Protestant friends, really. If we could just love Jesus like Mary loved Jesus, we would be unstoppable. Maybe second place, or maybe the first 1,000.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Or the first 1,000,000th. That'd be great.
In chapter 3, Mary and the Trinity, you say, in order for us to discover how Marian devotion can make a difference in our lives, let's look at her relationship with the Trinity. Why? What is it in the relationship to the Trinity that helps to show how important Mary can be in our lives?
Well, the Trinity is obviously a communion of love, one God, 3 persons, complete gift from the Father to the Son, the love of the Holy Spirit. I mean, it's very powerful, very intense. And out of all of humanity, Mary was the closest to that Trinitarian love. Open to the Father's will, filled with the Holy Spirit, really, actually, and truly filled with Jesus, the second person of the Blessed Trinity. That type of intimacy with the Trinity showed up in the way that she lived her life and how she treated other people. And I think we could learn a lot by seeing her in a relationship with the Trinity. It'll help us. We're certainly not immaculately conceived. We're certainly not, filled as she was. But in a way, at Mass, when I say amen, I am filled. I'm having an annunciation moment at the Eucharist. Jesus is in me, and hopefully I'm saying yes. Hopefully it's a familiar place of sorts for him, right? Having that open heart.
Right. Now, later on in the book, you talk about, in a chapter here, it's chapter 11, the attack. You talk about Mary as an advocate in the battle. You go on to say there's a war on the family, that one of the greatest attacks Satan has schemed in our present day is against motherhood, fatherhood, and the family overall, and that you say that there's really, in fact, a war on Mary as well.
Absolutely. Right. Think about Genesis 3:15, we call it the proto-evangelium, that there is this woman and her seed is going to crush the head of the serpent and his seed. I mean, there's this primordial battle between good and evil, and Our Lady is united with her Son in that victory, okay? And I love that because it really does explain a lot. You could see why the enemy would be hell-bent, really, honestly, to try to destroy the integrity and the beauty of women, the feminine, because the feminine, there's something profound and beautiful about women and their ability to model in time, right, this creativity and this life-giving reality. And the enemy will do everything possible to mar the feminine so that we have an improper understanding of Our Lady, and so that we don't see that that battle is genuine.
Well, it certainly seems like he's scoring a lot of points lately, unfortunately, in that area.
That's right.
This is interesting, too. Near the end of the book, you talk about following Our Lady's lead. You say, and in relation, you can walk with Christ or away from him. You can be like Mary or Judas. Is that what the choice is?
Well, I would say that's probably some of the extreme, that's an extreme, perspective there. We probably find ourselves in the middle a little bit too, St. Peter, a little Mary Magdalene. I mean, I think the more that we say yes, the more that we're like Our Lady. The more that we say no, and we want what we want, when we want, where we want, then we become a lot more like Judas.
Well, do you think that the choices are getting clearer in this day?
Well,
that there's starker decisions to be made in a lot of ways?
It seems to have great weight, doesn't it? Some of the choices that we're making, and where we stand on these choices is really of great importance.
Okay, now that is the book Holy Mary, Mother of God. Let's move on to your second work, Spirituality You Can Live With. Stronger Faith in 30 Days, or your money back, right?
I would suppose.
Okay, maybe from the publisher, not from you, right?
Correct.
Okay,
yeah.
Spirituality You Can Live With. Stronger Faith in 30 Days strikes me, hey, popular books these days are all about spirituality. In fact, there was a whole thing on the web not that long ago about how I can be spiritual, but I just don't need this religion thing.
Right.
You're not saying you don't need religion, right?
No, the context of authentic spirituality is found in, the context of the Catholic Church here. Really, a spirituality that would take you away from the sacraments is not a spirituality worth one's time and effort, because it's not. Look! I could put a hot dog over my ear, right, Doug? And I could say, ever since I put this hot dog over my ear, I have felt such joy and such peace. I am feeling so enlightened, right? And the reality is, I'm crazy. If that's what I'm thinking, because the hot dog doesn't have the ability to bring about that which I'm claiming that it can, right? But when I talk about a spirituality grounded in the Catholic faith, it really does bring about that which it bespeaks, because it's Christ-centered. I get a little excited about that.
No, I hear you there. Do you sense sometimes the people who like to talk about this kind of spirituality, it's really a way of kind of creating your own little church where you basically can follow what you believe, quote unquote, your conscience is leading you to do,
right,
and not feel guilty about all the things that you don't follow, right?
Right. Nobody wants to necessarily give up the things that are self-gratifying, right? We'd love to just give in to every whim and feeling and emotion, but a person who lives that way is not going to be, even from a basic ethical standpoint, a decent contributor to society. But there's got to be more to life than just gratifying ourselves. There's got to be something heroic about it. And we honor that, even in the worldly sense, don't we? People who put their life on the line, we honor them as heroes in battle. Look, when we are heroic in laying down our life for the truth and for the importance of Christ and His love, then our life is invaluable. We're living heroic.
Now, this is stretched over 30 days, right? That's what
right.
It is.
I put it in an Ignatian kind of flow, like a spiritual retreat. Yeah.
Okay, and you actually have even reflections at the end.
Yeah.
Now, would this be the kind of book that could be used individually as well as in some sort of a group if you wanted to?
Absolutely. Yeah, it has been used in that way. And I don't think that you have to stick with just 30 days, because you might need to spend a couple more days with some of those chapters, because they're meant to be to be explored. And so for example, the topic dealing with, brokenness and weakness and emptiness, honestly, that dealing with the issues in our life and the broken areas, that's a meaty topic that could be just spent on for quite some time.
Do you think sometimes people's concerns about getting involved in their faith and things like that is because they somehow think that they need to either suffer brokenness, weakness, or emptiness before they can do it, or if they start down that path, somehow they're going to end up like that, because it seems like that's where the conversions come out of.
Right. I remember when I was a young kid, I thought I could never go and talk about God because I was never in a gang. I never had a huge testimony, right? I needed to really live a life of crime and do lots of drugs for people to listen to me.
Right.
If I were just a good kid, nobody wants to listen to that.
Right, that's boring.
Ridiculous.
Right.
But the truth is that we're all broken, we're all weak, and at times we all brush up against emptiness. We all experience moments like that We don't have to go to jail for brokenness to be authentic. Just ask any kid who comes from a divorced home.
Right, exactly. There are 30 chapters, each of which deals with a primary spiritual point. I suggest you progress from start to finish, simply reading and thinking about the content of one chapter per day. This is in some ways a makeshift retreat for the person who just can't participate in that coveted month-long silent journey that promises renewal, or even to make a weekend retreat, which is even harder these days, with many times with both couples working and things like that, and the ability to get away, or the families are separated. You don't have mom and dad or the uncles and aunts who live nearby who can watch the kids. So the ability for people to get out of their home, that's one of the things we like to believe that EWTN helps to support in doing that as well. And you say, enjoy your next 30 days with this book. May you realize that Mary is pouring the graces of her Son in your life. Yeah, I noticed Our Lady's tied in there, and this was the book that came before Holy Mary, right?
Right. Yeah, I do believe that Our Lady wants to pour the graces of her Son into our life, wants us to learn how to will the good over the average. And I think that she's going to help us to do that. But for this book, I really wanted to look at the average Joe and Jane. Like, what does their life look like? And honestly, it gets messy sometimes. It gets very difficult for the third or fourth time having to go back to school because your kid left their lunch, because they forgot their backpack. I mean, you name it. It's like we're living in our cars these days, taking them to sporting events. Like, how can I possibly have a spiritual life when I can't get out of the car? And so I have a funny little chapter on taxi cab spirituality and just seizing tiny little moments. And if you pray to Hail Mary every few minutes that you got in the car, I think you could probably rustle through a few rosaries a day. Right. At least we could, the amount we have to go to school.
Right, I know the first time I came to EWTN and I saw Deacon Bill Steltemeyer driving down from radio. He was driving down from radio, and there he was with his rosary in his hand saying the rosary, and I have to admit, it impressed me at that time. You also say here, in talking about stronger faith in 30 days, on the other hand, I have seen countless people who seem to be walking, talking zombies. These living dead have bodies with a pulse, but their spirit is lifeless within. Who are these people, and what do you think is causing this?
Oh, man, I see this all the time. I do a lot of work with youth, college kids, and they're struggling with drugs, with addictions, trying to gratify and satisfy themselves with the things of this world. It's that idea of if I could just have a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that, then I'll finally be happy. But they're not happy. They're dead. Their eyes are glazed over, and there's really a difference between that type of pursuit of the something that's going to help me get to a place of happiness and really resting in the person of Jesus Christ. Right. It's hard for people to see, but if they could encounter some really, enthusiastic, filled with Christ in the sacrament Catholics, I think they might start to be appealed.
Do you think, though, that sometimes that's off-putting for people, too? They figure, because they think, well, this person's acting this way. Do they really believe that way? And there's a chapter here you talk about warning spiritual elitism. Spiritual elitism emphasizes outward activity over inward reality. In Jesus' time, the Pharisees were spiritual elites. They looked good on the outside, but their arrogance was harmful to themselves and others. Do you think sometimes coming out of the Irish Church, the Catholic Church in the United States, where religion was very enclosed because it wasn't allowed to really be practiced that openly, and had people who were very outward about their faith. Most people that I knew when I was growing up in a fairly Catholic area in the Northeast would tend to look at that person as a show-off.
Sure.
And would tend to not really believe them when they were giving their testimony.
Right. That's a loaded question. I think there are definitely those times where we look at somebody and ask ourselves, are they being authentic, or is this just another display of hypocrisy? And there is that. But here's the thing. I think we sense hypocrisy. I think especially young people sense hypocrisy. Jesus pinpointed hypocrisy. But what I'm talking about is being filled, with the sacramental life of Christ does not mean that we're bouncing off the walls. I mean, I am a little bit hyper. There is no doubt about it. But I'm also very flawed. I know once you meet and hang out with me for any length of time, there's really no question of whether or not, he's putting on a show, because it's just, I'm very rough around the edges. This is just our life. I mean, with 9 kids, okay, We're not all prancing in single file singing Latin as we walk from the living room to the dining room, right?
Right, and that's not indicative.
Somebody just speak English here for a second.
And that's not indicative of a holy household necessarily,
Right.
which is what you're saying as well.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. But when I come up to somebody, I'm not like, you know, trying to be as plastic as humanly, pretending I'm better than I am. I think that's not going to work.
Well, I'm just wondering, because sometimes I heard in the past, you know, there are some really good, solid Catholic colleges, not a lot, and you teach at one of them. And I've heard some stories, and certainly I always think they come out of this, there's this great support system, they're ready to go, and then they go out into the quote-unquote real parish world.
Right.
And it's cold.
It's hard.
And the people there look like what planet they came from.
That's true. Yeah, that is the big difficulty, I think, the practical application of this. I call it the bubble, to be real honest. They're in the bubble. They're in a great place of nurturing and encouragement, but they're going to go out and people are not going to be excited. They're not going to be running to Mass. They're not going to be like peer pressuring, let's all go to confession, right? That's real life is people are worn out and exhausted, and it's how do we live this spirituality in a way that's life-giving, encouraging. And honestly, the truth is we just have to start looking at people and loving people and accepting them right where they're at. Jesus loved us while we were still sinners. If we just started with that and loved people, though they're sinful, not perfect,
and meet them where they are.
Then we're going to change
Very good.
the world.
Just before we go, any other books or anything else you're working on right now?
I'm working on a book with the Eucharist, and I'm very excited about that.
Okay, well, good work and good luck. Thank you so
bless
much
you.
for stopping
Thank
by.
you.
Speaking here with Chris Padgett about two of his books, Holy Mary, Mother of God, and Spirituality You Can Live With, Stronger Faith in 30 Days. They're published by Servant Books and available through the EWTN Religious Catalog. Check them out and check us out next time right here on EWTN's Bookmark. Thanks for joining us.